Hey, it's Norm from Tested.com. Today I'm so excited to be in Southern California in this amazing lobby of Sideshow Collectibles. They're a company that's been around for almost 20 years making 6-scale, quarter-scale, half-scale, even 1-to-1 scale reproductions of your favorite characters from things like Star Wars, the Marvel movies, comic books, all sorts of amazing things in fandom. We're going to give you a little behind-the-scenes look at how some of these sculptures are designed, sculpted, and painted. So come along. Hi, so I'm joined by Tom Gilliland. You're the creative director here at Sideshow Collectibles. You're in charge of the entire creative process, and it is a process.
It is indeed, yeah.
Yeah, so I want to talk specifically about your premium format figures, these large 4th scale figurines that you guys use, sculptures, statues, and you do a wide range of them. You have licenses with DC, Marvel, with movies, with video games. What's the process like from conception to production?
It's pretty much a big journey, and that journey starts with a sort of exploration kind of a phase. So the design team starts to kind of create a blueprint for what we're going to do. So not terribly dissimilar than building a house, you kind of want to know where you're going to go. In this case, though, we're really looking for largely things like what's the essence of the character we're dealing with, what's the stylistic universe it kind of comes from. That's pretty important, and how we're going to determine how we're going to sculpt the piece, how we're going to paint it. And we're looking for things that are also the tone and also the presentation. How are we going to arrest someone's imagination when they look at this piece in an effective way?
So let's look at this example. This is Superman, obviously, but it's not the Christopher Reeve Superman. This is what you would think of as like the comic book version of Superman.
Yeah.
Maybe something like the Alex
kind of
Ross.
from the illustrated worlds that he's inhabited.
So you got the license. You got the rights to do a Superman statue. Do you then hire an artist in-house to draw up sketches of their interpretation? Do you look to comic book art? What's the process?
Both of those are in the spectrum of what we're doing, and I think the thing that kind of characterizes our design, early phases, is a bit of a survey. Our kind of go-tos in this particular case, we're looking for a sort of strong, very chest-out, iconic pose that really gave the Superman S a great presentation element in the composition here, and also the cape was something that we felt, well, the suit in itself is somewhat subtle, but the cape tends to give him all of his sort of majesty, if you will. And then a little bit in the base, we were trying to allude to the Fortress of Solitude. So there's different elements at work that are trying to kind of flip a number of triggers in the viewer's mind.
And the good thing is that your artists are all fans, so in their heads, they get that essence.
Yeah, absolutely, and that obviously is huge fuel for the fire. It can be as confusing in that same regard, in the sense that we all have a different vision of it. So I think one of the most interesting elements of these collaborations with the art staff that I have is in sort of distilling up that universal sense of it. And I think we've done our job the best is when we've kind of captured everyone in the room's imagination in a way that hopefully reflects the way the larger collector community will respond to the piece as well.
So Tom, how does that process change when the product, the statue we're talking about, is supposed to be a likeness of a movie character, an actor?
Well, great point. And it is a very distinctly different sort of sensitivity that you got to bring to the project at that point. When you're no longer dealing with sort of the idealism of a character and you're dealing with the sort of reality of what they are, it can be a sort of exercise in subtleties at that point. So in this particular case, when we're looking at Indiana Jones, we're also dealing with the likeness, the very real likeness of Harrison Ford, which, if he doesn't look like Harrison Ford, that sort of spoils the soup right there. So in addition to kind of getting that right, which is it's really on the technical side of the way the sculpture comes off, you also want to sort of study the film. You want to study the actor's movements, you want to study some of his body language and the ways that he's often presented, not just in the film poster, but also in the more subtle or the more casual elements within the film. Because these are all things that are sort of fingerprints of the character's sort of presentation. And
you're not exactly duplicating a still from the movie or one photo, one exact pose, but you want to get the essence of Harrison Ford.
Yeah.
It's like you said, like a movie poster, like when Drew Struzan paints a poster, you recognize that as Harrison Ford, but it's not a photo.
Yeah, and sometimes sometimes they play with things. Sometimes it's very much something that you've seen in the film, and at other times it's sort of straining to kind of bring a little mythology to the character as well, which is what we did in this particular case. For instance, Indy doesn't really get a moment of victory with that idol that he takes out of the temple. Yeah. But we felt that we're going to give him a break for once and actually give him that moment to sort of savor the victory, even though Belloc takes it away from him shortly thereafter, and really awesome piece of dialogue. So in this particular case, it was also about replicating the authenticity of the details. So here you have a lot of activity going on in regards to the cut and sew and the fabrication that is also part of the premium format presentation.
Yeah, I noticed both in the Superman and the Indy, this is real fabric.
Yeah,
it's not just a sculpted suit. He's
yeah, very much. They're sort of multimedia presentations. So it gives us a wide range of ability to not only replicate things, but also kind of to create different senses with the piece. So sometimes a piece will be, perhaps there's a lot of detail in the suit, and in order to capture that, we'll go with the sculpted solution. Other times, the fabric really lends a sense of depth to these particular projects. So we definitely endeavor to get that in there as often as we can. So in the case of Superman, using a sculpted cape contrasted to a fabric suit allows us to give the cape the sort of presence and a sort of pose that the cape wants to kind of
that fabric can't do in the aesthetic sense.
Exactly.
Just like in the movie, the cape is CG combined.
Exactly. So you're just sort of making your decisions as to what will influence the composition the best. So in the case of Indy, then it becomes, because his pose is much more a little bit more stoic. It allows us to focus on the garments a lot more. So finding leathers and different textured garments that not only match color but the tooth of fabric, and give you that sense of scale as well is a big thing. When we're working in quarter scale, it's not often that you can just take standard fabrics and find success. A lot of times you have to look for things that are a little tighter in their weaves and whatnot, so that it looks like what fabric does when you look at someone, say, standing across the room, which is these are about what someone is about 20 feet away from you.
Yeah.
That's the sort of level of appreciation you have to have. So if someone's lapels or whatnot are done with a very heavy fabric and they become really bulky, it sort of spoils the illusion. So you have to find different ways to kind of translate the details.
And I gotta imagine it's a collaboration between a bunch of different artists. If someone's expertise is in the portraiture and someone's expertise in getting the fabric right and sewing or the prop work, all that stuff has to come together for one statue.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's where, in our early blueprint phase, and even that terminology really, really nails it on the head, is because all the different artists and the masters in their medium have to kind of weigh in on how the plan may come together. And everyone's sort of, obviously their vested interest is making the best piece. So everybody's looking for those things that are going to give them the best opportunity to kind of make their move, so to speak. And in some cases, there may be things where, they may be saying, look, I think it's going to be better, for you to do it as a sculptural element, or the sculptures often interact with the cut and sew team to determine, hey, if you guys can do this in cut and sew, this would really bring an amazing, dimension to this piece. So it creates a nice volatile and extremely creative environment for how to proceed with the piece.
So we've talked about an iconic look, a real life likeness, and then there are also products that you do that are just creative exercises. Because this is Sir Alec Guinness as Obi-Wan, but young Sir Alec Guinness.
Yeah, so this was part of our Star Wars Mythos line, and the exercise here was to kind of give something back to these properties. Oftentimes we're either interpreting or we are, outright sort of reproducing the look from the film, but that as creatives, there's an aspect of, wow, we want to kind of get in there and give something back, especially to Star Wars, something that's been maybe one of the richest well springs of creativity that I've encountered in my creative career. And so what we wanted to do with Mythos was give people a look at characters that were very well institutioned in the core canon, but give you a certain look of things that you knew existed, but you'd never really gotten to see. So that idea that in this particular case, Obi-Wan spent, what are we talking, 18 or so years in the wastes of Tatooine as the hermit, building that sort of mythology. And so I kind of wanted to take a look at that. I was a big fan of the Clone Wars animation and whatnot, so we got to see him as a general in a very different kind of a way. And so I wanted to bring a little of that into this piece too. And there's sort of aspects of, Lawrence of Arabia and just these, great sequences where, Peter O'Toole puts on the Arab garments for the first time and kind of blowing in the breeze. So I was like drawing all these different inspirations. But one of the other aspects was this really interesting element that I saw, especially when I saw, Ewan McGregor in the third film where he had grown the beard, and you could really see that sort of, wow, this blur point between he and Alec Guinness is getting thinner and thinner. And I mean, just a wonderful piece of casting. Not only is he a great actor, but just in appearance, it was so believable. And so a feature that we put into this piece was to do a portrait of Alec Guinness, how he might have looked maybe 10, 15 years earlier in his journey, as well as take Ewan McGregor and do a portrait that was a little older than what we saw him last in episode 3, and give the collector the opportunity to kind of decide where that line was for them, or experience it both ways. So it was a great piece in that it gave us a nice sort of platform to make a little Star Wars statement, but also to kind of draw out this part where there's sort of this duality of two actors playing a role, but find that balance point that made it all kind of come together.
And your job is to get to turn these creative exercises, the stuff that you have turning your head, into real tangible products. That is so amazing. How did you get started in this business? Were you a sculptor or a painter?
I was a painter. I did a lot of work with model kit companies that were pushing into figural models. Models used to be pretty dominated by cars, planes, tanks. Maybe in the early 90s, the attention turned back to figural subjects, where it had been a little bit in the 60s with the Aurora models. And as these model kit companies came up, the thing was they generally wanted a box model that was painted as a sort of demonstration of, hey, what if you did it, this is what it'll look like. And that's where I was able to kind of get my foot in the door and start my art career, was doing these box prototypes. And that sort of led into a 4-year, 5-year stint. I worked with Rick Baker's Cinovation on films like Men in Black and Mighty Joe Young. I found that to be exciting and whatnot, and certainly a big stage to do the kind of artwork I did on. But the one thing that I was missing was the element of sort of the completeness of working on products such as this. We did a lot of maquette type work in film to sort of, again, in a way like blueprint what was going to be in film. At the same time, would often be able to look at these things and say, God, this is the kind of stuff that collectors were just killed to have. And so this sort of thinking was what helped sort of start the basic building block, or the foundation of what Sideshow was to become and what we've become today, which is purveyor of all this sort of iconic character artwork.
And a lot of people that work here, the sculptors and painters, worked in maybe the movie business, worked on maquettes and props, and the work that you guys get to do here are even more detailed, because it's not just supposed to appear on screen from far away for 3 seconds. It's going to live in someone's home.
Yeah, I mean, the statements that we make certainly fall under a greater level of scrutiny, and I think appropriately. The collectors that invest in these pieces are really looking to invest in the characters that mean something to them, inspire them, challenge them. And so to give them something that has that level of fidelity and detail and just captures the character for them, so that when they're sitting in their entertainment room or their office, it's a place it's a piece that takes them to that place where they had that relationship, whether they were a youth or it's in their later life. It's kind of connecting them to that inspiration and the power of what these characters mean to all of us.
Well, thank you so much, Tom, for speaking with us and doing amazing work at Sideshow here. We're going to speak to a sculptor and a painter on your team to get more into the detail of how you produce these pieces. Thank you.
Awesome.